And it's Monday, which means it's MMOBuff.TV time. Welcome to episode 9, where we get to dive into all things legal, copyright, DRM, and who better to guide us through that tricky maze but our very special guest. Why, it's the TheEnigmaticT from GOG. Say hello, Trevor.
Oh, you're still
Hello,
muted.
Trevor.
There we go.
I'm still muted?
You were for a second.
Right. Sorry about that.
We now have audio with Trevor. Let's try that again. Say hello, Trevor.
Hello, my name is Trevor. I work for GOG, and I will be your temporary expert on all things DRM and evil.
Wonderful. And talking of evil, what's that face I see peering out of the shadows?
Hi, everybody. It's Pseudo. I am in shadows to show you how much I love you. I am literally doing this show by candlelight tonight. Yes, that's why it's dark.
So
There's
Pseudo.
a creepy face behind me.
Now, normally when we do a show, we use things like lights, cameras, microphones. You seem to be using sort of parts of chickens, candles, and other ritualistic things tonight. Well, what's going on over there?
Parts of chickens. You weren't supposed to know about that. That was supposed to be hidden from view.
I thought that was dinner. Sorry.
It actually was. How did you know I was having chicken for dinner? But no, I have an electricity problem going on in the house, so I have literally fought tooth and nail to ensure that my system works. It's just my lighting doesn't, and you get candles. So that's how much I love you guys. Yes, the Chua cut my power off. Very much so, Izgu.
Before we dive into the news, because we have no Gazimoff, so we're going to share news round duties tonight. Trevor, perhaps you could give people, not perhaps your entire life story, but a quick background to GOG and all things DRM to get people thinking before we dig into the topic a little later.
Certainly. Well, MMO Buff is obviously an MMO community, and GOG is, I'd say, a little bit different audience than maybe what you guys are normally acquainted with. GOG is an online games distribution service. We're kind of like Steam, except we're completely DRM-free. We got our start back in 2008 selling classic games. GOG used to stand for Good Old Games. But then about 2 years ago now, we shifted a bit and sell not just classic games, but a whole variety of games. From our oldest game is from 1981. We have Zork 1, back when there was no graphics, just text. And our most recent game was released today, Aqua Teen Kitty something. I forget the name of it. Regardless, we have a great variety of titles, great variety of content, and all of it's DRM-free, and all of it's good gaming, we'd like to argue still. So that's kind of what makes GOG a different source out there than many places.
Fabulous. Well, if someone wants to take their turn being Awkward Kitty or said title, we'll come up with a way perhaps you can do that later. But Pseudo, we have some news. Yes. Perhaps you could do an impression of Gazimoff, Tweed not included. And take us through the news. God. We'll have a bit of a quick discussion about them, and we'll then get back into the main event a little after that. Take it away, Pseudo.
So now I get to impersonate Gazimoff. I have a feeling the Gazi Chew is going to kill me when he sees this, but just understand I do this with love, Gazi. Don't hurt me. Okay. So it would seem... I can't do that. Never mind. I can't pull it off. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to be myself, and we'll just talk about the news that way. First off, the big news, at least within the MMO community, is the fact that Team Wildstar has had to say goodbye to Troy. I'm not going to cry again like I did last show in the Cosmotronic on Friday when we announced it again. I just know, Troy, we love and we miss you. But there is some good news as well. It seems that Team Wildstar is going to start streaming. Now, this is good news for us, at least, because we all want to know more. And because of the fact that, you know, we don't even have a release date yet, we're eagerly anticipating everything we can get information-wise about it. Plus, there is a current competition going on in Wildstar Central to name Troy's replacement, Christophe. He's actually left it completely in the community's hands. I think that's a little naughty. We'll see what the community comes up with. But yes, so yay, Wildstar!
And I'm still waiting to comb over those live streams in detail because for those of us that have sort of pored over every video they've produced, it has been known that the odd secrets slip out from time to time, and I'm quite sure their live streaming will give them many more opportunities to let things slip, shall we say. But let us move on from Wildstar. What else is happening in the world?
Oh, goodness. I'm seriously going to try and do Gazi again, but I can't. Considering the fact that our show is all about copyright, it's about DRM, it's about trademarking and things like this. Last week, it wasn't necessarily last week, it was during the week that TotalBiscuit had a problem. And we talked in a little bit of detail about the copyright claim that was levied against him. And we think it was because the gaming distributor didn't like what he had to say. And they pulled their copyright claim out, and the response, which in my opinion I completely agree, it's kind of a weak-hearted response, was something along the lines of, well, we've seen the negativity of this, particular event, so we've just decided to cancel the copyright claim. And I'm just sitting there going,
and our show title is dedicated to that event, as it gives us a lovely segue.
Sure. It is interesting to me. It is not uncommon for people to use poor examples of DMCA takedowns to stifle speech. So I'd say TotalBiscuit is by no means the first person to suffer from this, and will not be, I'm sure, the last, but it is at least topical for today, yes.
It is, and to those who haven't seen the videos, and obviously the DCMA strike has now been removed. Stefan from, I believe it's Wild Game Studios, made the kind of half apology. And let me just say out there, because I've had 2 or 3 people actually get this one wrong in conversations, Wild Game Studios, one entity. Wildstar, Carbine, unrelated.
Completely unrelated. Please do not mix the two up.
Let's go back. What's next on the list, Pseudo?
Oh, goodness gracious. I keep looking at the chat instead of my notes. Sorry. Next up, Path of Exile, the free-to-play ARPG, is now fully live on Steam. Sorry. It's on Steam. There you go. The launch patch brought full rework of the full 1350 talent tree, as well as a new Scion class type archetype. It's really hard to read by candlelight. That's all I'm going to say. It's my excuse for the evening.
I'm going to throw in. I'm going to insert a random question here. Trevor, you've obviously got a host of gaming experiences here. Have you ever dabbled in the MMO sphere?
What kind of a what? I'm sorry.
Have you ever managed to dabble in the MMO sphere?
I did some. I, back many years ago, and I guess I'm showing now how old I am, played some Ultima Online, the original
game.
Good game. And also when I was in college, a roommate and I did played some EverQuest, and he got hooked to it to the point where he failed out his entire first semester. So EverCrack for a reason. And played some Guild Wars 2 as well with some friends of mine fairly recently.
Awesome. With those ones then, if you had to take a preference in the MMO field, or in terms of MMO play style, obviously in an MMO you have to sink, or you tend to sink, a lot of time into something to get those rewards.
Yes.
How do you compare that with what I would say is often a pick-up instant gratification on a lot of the older titles that are out there? Quite often you can pick up a game and there might be 15, 20 hours worth of content to consume, but when it's consumed, it's say consumed, versus the continual nature of an MMO. Does that have an impact, being totally random here, on distribution strategy?
I do believe so. For a few reasons, and it's actually, there's an interesting, if you want to talk about the reward process for MMO versus a regular single-player game. Single-player game has a long investment for the reward. Eventually you finish it, you've accomplished something. MMOs are increasingly now a Skinner box, where every 15 minutes you accomplish something, and then 15 minutes you accomplish something else, and again, and again. It never ends. They're essentially training you on a drip feed of dopamine to become hooked on it, which is what makes MMOs kind of dangerous. But a traditional game, because it works on this play it, finish it, go the next one, I do believe that's why you see a lot of digital distribution of standard single-player games. They end up doing kind of like a bulk sale where you'll see games 70, 80% off that you don't see happening in MMO area. You'll either see a free-to-play mechanic or you'll see a regular subscription that's pretty much always going to be that price.
Yes. Nope. Very true indeed. Let us bounce back to the news. We still have more. And let's have some spooky news, please, Pseudo, to go with the background.
Oh, okay, spooky. I can try to do spooky. Gosh,
I can always turn on the echo effects.
It would only echo you. I don't think it would echo me. Greetings. It would seem that Nvidia has decided to allow all of us to have access to 3 big-name titles when it comes to their new video cards. This is important news because they are 3 very, very big names, and I am totally horrible at this.
I'm loving it. You should do the whole show.
And our special guest, Vlad the Impaler, is with us.
No, Vlad is not female. Thanks.
So Vlad, maybe I should call you a Vladette. What are the games they're bringing onto the table? Because that's a bit of a surprise to me, given the strength of those games, in all candor.
Well, to be perfectly frank, what's interesting to me is that this seems to be part of like their Shield promotion. And for those who don't know about Shield, we probably might want to actually explain it to them. But you're getting big names like Assassin's Creed Black Flag bundled with the video card. You're getting Arkham Asylum, I believe it is, with it. And the other one is the Splinter Cell Blacklight, I think it is. I can't remember the exact name, sorry. But those are 3 like what we would term AAA titles, and they're being bundled with the video card, and it's all about Shield. So perhaps you can take a moment and explain what Shield is for those who don't know what the Shield happens to be. Oh dear.
Let's see where this goes now. I have to say I am not an expert on all things Shield. There are a few bits and pieces that I probably can't talk about quite yet till I come back from my trip to the States. So we might just park that one to talk about some future stuff.
Fair enough.
What else do we have in our news list?
Well, we know that Blizzcon is coming up. We know that you're disappearing to America to Blizzcon, among other places you're visiting. You've got a very full trip ahead of you. I don't know what you're going to come around and do.
I have 2 days out of 11 that don't have pre-booked meetings.
Yeah. I know where you're going. But anyway, BlizzCon 2013, the site is up, and they have announced part of their swag packs, which is kind of nice. The swag packs seem to include 3 minifigures of Arthas, Kerrigan, and Diablo, which is interesting. We still don't have all of the massive news that is going to be coming out yet about that. Things like Hearthstone. There could be announcements of maybe something about an expansion. We don't know. But there's a whole bunch of awesome speculation about what's going to be happening at BlizzCon. You can actually, if you've got your virtual ticket, you can watch it. If you're going, you can go. But, you know, they're releasing new things on the BlizzCon shop as well. And yeah, I still want a plushie Murloc. I don't care what anyone says. They're awesome.
One thing for those who do want to dig into the Blizzard news in a bit more detail, obviously on the mini site now, the schedules are up. So you can see the titles of some of the panels, and perhaps a fair bit could be intuited from those. Also interesting to me, if you really know the devs and the people behind the game, is the ability to say, well, who is on these panels? And, right, this is their job, this is what they do. And there's some interesting names on a couple of the panels. I'll let people dig and decide that for themselves.
I am also incredibly jealous of you, Abs Nerdy, because I really want a plushie Murloc, and I am very, very sad that I do not have one. Just saying.
Tetic, that's at least 4.5 hours away. I couldn't possibly consider it. Moving on.
Yes. Planetside 2.
Planetside 2. What do we have happening
Have you ever played Planetside 2, Trevor?
I actually have a little bit with some of my coworkers from GOG. One of them is a really hardcore Planetside fanatic who I believe the day that Planetside 1 shut down probably had like a vigil service via candlelight and the whole sad thing. So he was elated when Planetside 2 started, and he's been for the last, I don't know, 2 years. Every time news comes out about it, comes right through the office with like, look at this printout. So yeah, I've had some chance to be proselytized by him and try out Planetside 2 a little bit. Yeah.
Well, he's someone who may very well enjoy this because they're running an event called the Nanite of the Living Dead. And it's taking place Wednesday, 30th of October at 2000 hours BST. Now, it's not the 31st, and it's not the 31st on purpose, because, hey, it's a party night. Lots of people are out and about doing things with pumpkins. So they're doing things on the 30th. It's the opportunity to meet up with some zombie leaders, become a zombie, run around the place and see how many people we can actually infect. So the zombies get to use knives, everyone else gets to shoot them with guns, and we see who gets to overrun who. And I think what we'll do
Apparently, we're getting a desktop and not cameras, so I'm interrupting you, like I said I would do!
I'd love to know how you're getting a desktop and not cameras, but there we go. What we will do is we'll post a quick news article on both Facebook and on the site tonight with all the details for those who want to join in. It's being done in conjunction with Rock Paper Shotgun. It's being nicely sponsored by Prosebian Sat 1. There are some prizes. You can get t-shirts, boxed copies of the game, and a few other goodies. So keep an eye on the channels to see that. And hey, we'll probably put a roundup of all the other Halloween festivities and other MMOs. But
yes, Planetside 2 also has the World Dominion series going as well.
Oh, it does. Lots going on.
And, well, that's something Matthew Higby via MMORPG actually did a breakdown of it, and the link will be coming from the Iconator. So we'll have that taken care of. Yeah. So you can dig in.
Oh, and as Ico mentioned, just by participating, you can get some in-game camo, which is something players quite like. Collect all those unique skins. But is it
achievement thing?
Is it time to dig into the main topic of choice?
I think that's a really good idea. Because in all honesty, this is a kind of topic that we're going to try to consolidate to one show, but I'm going to be perfectly blunt with you. This is not, it's a topic that you can easily just say this is kind of what it is, but the reality is the topic is so huge, it touches so many parts of our lives in ways that most people don't even realize. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Remember, if you got questions, comments, concerns, you know, definitions of what you think things are that we're not quite nailing, let us know. But basically, we're now going to do the spooky thing, and we are going to insert little pliers and wires into Trevor's mind, and we're going to pick his brain to help inform you.
You did see that bit on the pre-show notes, I trust.
Wires will be used.
So, let me give a couple of words and then we'll pass over to Trevor. A few things that intertwine, and a three-letter acronym many people will have heard is DRM. And those of you that pay a lot of attention to newsworthy things in this sphere, they'll have seen the no DRM revolution mentioned. Something that a lot of us are really quite pleased about. So, I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to jump and show you once more our show title. And it's interesting because the image you're looking at is no longer available. And at that point, I'm going to pass you over to Trevor, who's going to explain what DRM is and how that could possibly happen.
Did our show image get taken down for copyright reasons?
All right. DRM is also known as copy protection. And it is a series of, I'll say, controversial technologies that are designed to control how you consume content. Not explicitly limited to video games. DRM exists on ebooks, it exists on music, it exists on movies, it exists on any type of digital copying of content, which is why digital rights management. DRM didn't exist back when there was, you know, tape decks and vinyl, because you can't control analog copying of content. And with the rise of digital content, people realized, one, it's much easier to content than it used to be. It's lossless. And so people began to fret over the fact that people are copying content and somehow they're not getting paid. Now, people have been copying content since the invention of, I don't know, the printing press. Indeed, many authors back even in the 1600s were complaining about how they weren't getting royalties for their books. So it's not a new problem, but the ability to actually control copying is a new solution to an old problem. It's not a very good solution, because if you are copying content illegally and you're using ways to get around the DRM because otherwise you couldn't copy it, then you don't have to deal with the DRM. It's only people who actually pay for a product have to put up with DRM. So as a result, if you've ever tried to play a game on a different console than the one that you own and you found some of your content's not there, or maybe you've reinstalled your operating system and suddenly some of your software is like, I don't believe this is your computer, or whatever it is that ends up happening when you make a change that the content creators aren't cool with, they lock down what you can do with your content, and as a result, you find yourself stuck with stuff you paid for you can't actually consume. At GOG, we think that's pretty crappy, so we're opposed to it.
So let's backtrack for 1 second then, if people are jumping into the chat. Sum up what DRM is in that 2 sentences. So if I'm in conversation and I'm talking to Aunt Mildred's goldfish that's not particularly technical, and I happen to say,
Sure.
I had a really bad experience with the DRM on blank. And in a granny-like voice she says, dear, what's DRM? How should I answer that?
I'm surprised a goldfish can talk, but go for it.
That is a surprisingly talented goldfish, and I think it's missing a career in showbiz, but we'll go around that and instead be like, whoa, I'm tripping balls, the goldfish is talking to me, but I'll answer its question anyway.
Always a smart move when you
question,
encounter a talking goldfish.
Exactly, I never question a talking goldfish. Then I say, Aunt Mildred's talking goldfish. DRM is a suite of technologies, a type of technology that controls how and when you can copy and play stuff you paid for.
And I think that touches on one of the core issues, because, okay, let's just leave backup out of things for a moment. Copying something, duplicating something, that's one whole conversation. We'll probably go there a little later. But hang on, when I can play this stuff, well, it's my stuff. I've bought it, haven't I?
Sure.
Well, before you go into that, you think you kind of have to take it a step back further, because a big part of why technology like this seems to exist is to ensure that the people who created things actually get some kind of kickback for the work that they've done. So one of the big questions I threw at you, Trevor, when I first met you is, do you actually think there is a way to have these games, these things like that, done without DRM in a manner that actually still allows the developers to get paid? Which is the big reason why at least some people say DRM is why it's there. It's to ensure the payment happens, et cetera, et cetera. But it originates back there. It originates with money, obviously. Everything originates with
So
money.
about 16 topics to address in your reply then, Trevor.
You can do it. I have faith.
I will start with DRM and payment for what you are consuming are entirely unrelated. And there's no actual link between the two of them. Because otherwise, then everyone would be stealing paper books because there's no DRM with them. Okay, digital, paper, analog, it's not a perfect analogy, but whatever. The fact that DRM can control how you play content, to go back to Martin's question, I'll give you an example from my actual life. I'm an American, you can probably tell from my accent. I live in Warsaw, Poland. I'm not Polish, you can probably tell from my accent. However, I have an American Steam account, which I've had back since Steam was new and in short pants. And when I attempt to play my Steam games, I can play them just fine. But if I attempt to buy a game on Steam, it says, well, you're connecting from a Polish IP address, so you have to pay with royalties. But then it's an American game you're trying to buy, because it's an American account, and you can't pay for those games with royalties, so you can't buy games on Steam. As a result, the only way I can actually buy games on my Steam account is to buy through Humble Bundle or through Gamersgate or through any other service, which is really stupid because now Steam isn't even getting the money for the games I want to play on Steam. Now, that's a case of where DRM is actually hurting them. Their own DRM is screwing them out of their 30% of the revenue they should be getting for the games I'm buying. So there's an example where it limits me because I can't buy a game on Steam, but it also limits them because they didn't get money from me. Now, I'm enough of an edge case where they don't care. But there are other cases where, for example, you may be in a flat in the UK and your power goes out while you're attempting to use software. And if you aren't fortunate enough to have your power only be out on your switches and not on your actual sockets as well, you have no internet, and suddenly you can't play games because it says I have to authenticate online and I can't, so these games are probably stolen, so you can sod off.
Do you believe that the actual act of applying that kind of DRM is to test to see if something is stolen?
That's, all right. When you put DRM on a game, you do it because you're making decisions behind risk management, and you're doing it via checklist. If you say to yourself, people steal games, I need to prevent them from stealing my games, so I can either think of a clever way to prevent my game from being stolen, or I can say I put secure mode on and call my job done. So that's what a lot of people do, and as a result, they're like, I tried my best, there's DRM, the internet's tough, dude. And they're not, like, I haven't tried to think about a good solution.
I could say, well, at least they didn't use Starforce, but that comment aside, let's talk about some of the smart ways someone might solve that problem. You've said, okay, I'm the corporate bean counter. We've got a great new hot property, and I want to sell 1 million units, and I don't want 500,000 units to be copied by the first 500,000 people that buy it, and I don't want them torrented because, hey, that's all people are going to do. I'll DRM it, problem solved. Okay, well, we're debating that's not the case, so what do you advise to the bean counter instead?
Well, that's actually, there is an answer that is simple but not easy. How about that? The simple answer is put DRM on. Of course, it's a foolish answer because things pirates enjoy doing is cracking DRM. So I'll give you an example of a AAA game that's a hot property that was released and has no DRM. That's The Witcher 2, produced by sister company to GOG.com, CD Projekt Red. They released a hugely award-winning RPG that's gotten best of everything for forever, and they released it without DRM. They released it on GOG without DRM. And of course the game was pirated. Of course it was pirated, because every game is going to be pirated. With that said, the game that was pirated most, the version that was pirated most, was actually the retail version of the game, which had DRM on it. So the GOG version of the game was, of course, yes, also pirated, but not as heavily as the retail version was. Furthermore, when you look at all of the stores out there that sold the game for download online, Steam, of course, is #1 because they're huge. And then the #2 store was GOG, which is not surprising because we are the #2 largest independent digital distributor out there, but it's how close we were to Steam. We had, I think, a fifth of their number of units sold in the first 90 days, but we're nowhere near a fifth their side. So people came to us because we had a DRM-free alternative and bought from us heavily. Now, what do we do that makes our alternative cool? Aside from DRM-free, we put extra content in the games. We offer customer support that's really good on our end, where if the game doesn't work, we'll try and fix it for you. The fact that we go out of our way to provide value beyond just, here's a game, figure it out, tough luck, means people who want to pay for this game will. People who don't want to pay for the game, you know what? They're not going to pay for the game. So when you see that you sold 1 million copies of The Witcher 2 and there were 7 million copies that were pirated, don't say to yourself, I could have made 8 million copies. You couldn't have. Because out of those 7 million, I don't know, a wild guess, 6.9 of them were never going to buy your game. So yes, you do lose some sales from piracy, but you're not losing much. And even the people who pirate may indeed come back and buy at some point.
Have there ever been any studies that aren't perhaps, backed by a very strong vested interest, hello RCIAA, in and around such things as the percentage of sales lost with piracy? Are there anything reliable or academic out there?
They're almost unquantifiable because I've seen some studies. There was an interesting one done about Deus Ex Human Revolution where they made a version of it. I forget who it was now, and my brain is old and crappy. Someone uploaded a version of it that at the end of it gave you a survey link. It said, hey, we hope you enjoyed your pirated copy of Deus Ex Human Revolution. Please fill out the survey. So of the people who filled the survey out, 2/3 of the people who pirated this game said they pirated it and they had no interest in buying it anyway. About 10% of them said they pirated it because there's no demo. And they might buy it if they like the game and or it runs on their system. So that means out of the people who might actually buy, you've got like 20% of the pirates maybe would buy. But a whole lot of these people come from countries where they're not going to be dropping $60 USD for your game. And frequently they can't even buy the game there anyway. You know, you're like, you live in Croatia. There's no distribution there for Deus Ex Human Revolution, so oddly enough, the piracy numbers are really high.
Well, it's very similar to, and you know, we are talking games and stuff, but I'm going to sort of shift the focus a little bit to the real start of it, for at least for me, was when Metallica's Eric Larson's went, roar, leave Metallica alone, roar. I watched a documentary not too long ago with him where there were people in the Middle East, there were people in like third world countries and things that were like, yay, we're Metallica fans, but we pirate everything because we cannot get access to this stuff. And Lars's response was, yeah, it's okay. I get it now. And I'm just sitting there going, die. You know, you have the big, strong proponents of RAR, put all this DRM and be all protected, prevent sharing, yada, yada. And then a guy's just like, yeah, I get it. And it's kind of sort of like that, what you were just saying, but from a musical standpoint. Some countries you cannot get access to it. Some countries it's incredibly expensive. You know, not saying that we're proponents or supporting of people who are pirating things and not paying developers what they're supposed to be doing. You're just letting you know that right now. I'm just saying that I can understand their viewpoint, because sometimes understanding the other viewpoints helps you to come up with an actual solution.
Sure, and there's a interesting way to look at what makes you pirate is when you want to play a game, regardless of whether you're willing to pay money for it or not, you're going to pay something for it. You're either going to pay money, or you're going to pay time, or you're going to pay your sense of self-worth, right? Because everyone knows that piracy is it's a little shady. Even people who are like, I pirate a lot. I'm like, if you did something creative and I took copies of it and didn't pay you, would you be pissed? They'd be like, a little maybe. So even people who pirate a lot still realize that there's ethically not always the best solution. So when you're young, you look at these three currencies to pay with. You don't have much money because you're young. You're getting an allowance, or maybe you work, I don't know, as a fry cook at McDonald's. Regardless, not lucrative career options here. So then you have to look at how much of your money versus your time versus your self-worth you're willing to invest into paying for this game legitimately. But if you get into the hobby and you grow a passion for being a gamer, as years go by, you have less time. And you begin to feel a little more like this is actually crappier than I thought it was, and you have more money. So you say, you know what, I'm going to pay for these games now because finding a torrent, cracking it, making sure that this is not full of malware, and now all of my ads are showing some sort of terrible Viagra pictures, and oh God, this kind of thing is a pain. So instead you're like, it's $15. You know what? Sure, I'll pay. Because as you get into a space where you're more financially secure, you can do this. So I'm opposed to piracy as well. I don't pirate games myself. I work for a digital distributor. We don't approve piracy. All of that said, just like libraries make people into readers because you have free access to books, and then eventually you pay for books because you'd rather not go to the library. I can see the argument to be made where piracy gets people who have no other alternative to be gamers. And then the hope is eventually through a service like GOG, where we're still DRM free, we still believe in the value of the customer, but we also say, you know what, we're doing everything we can to reduce the cost of time and to make it feel like we're treating you special, to inflate the same self-worth value of this game, so that the money cost of this game is as low as it can be compared to the other two currencies you're paying in, and suddenly it becomes a lot more attractive.
Okay, well let's...
So basically, piracy, the gateway drug for gamers.
There you go, the gateway
That's
drug
what we walk away with this.
Yes.
There are a couple of
There's your
comments
headline.
from people from the chat, and I'd like to address a couple of them because we're moving quickly through topics, and I want to make certain that we pull them in. A couple of individuals have pointed out that when it comes to buying a game or software, something, you're not actually buying the game, you're buying a license to actually sort of rent or use that particular piece of codes, bits, ones, and zeros.
Yes.
And when it comes to DRM and things that impact DRM, it seems to me, at least, as a bystander who loves games, as someone who is incredibly passionate about games and who will sit there and wait till things go really, really, really on sale, because otherwise I would have no money. Thank you, GOG, for putting things on sale. You make my pocketbook lighter. But when it comes to the purchasing of games, we're not really purchasing games. We're purchasing the DRM that comes with the license in order to use these games. It's almost as if, almost by default, we're sort of feeding their habits. Do you think that's because people don't know that there are things like GOG or DRM? I mean, like we said, one of the biggest questions we got from our viewers is, what the hell is DRM?
Sure. Just because you're being forced into an unfavorable transaction doesn't mean you have to like it. Right? I have altered the bargain. Pray I don't alter it any further. You know, Darth Vader can pull that off. And maybe some of the guys out there in the industry are attempting a Darth Vader sort of move here. I won't be making any names, but regardless, I do think that just because there are bad offers out there that force you into shrink-wrap contracts that are crappy, doesn't mean you should be like, well, I guess that's what I have to accept. You're correct. You're buying a license. Even when you buy a game from GOG, you buy a license. You don't buy a game. Particularly because we can't really send you anything physical over those copper wires. But regardless, when you buy that license, you do have in it, in a variety of countries, certain implicit rights, not in all countries. So at GOG's particular case, we attempt to make sure the rights are all as liberal as they can be for everybody. Whether it is we are favoring American copyright law and saying, you know what, sure, you can stream our videos on, stream our games on a video channel on YouTube because that's fair use as long as you're making editorial content out of it, or whether we say EU consumer law says that if your stuff is completely broken, you should be allowed money back, guaranteed. Whatever these things are, we try and work with that to be as consumer friendly as we can, because in this situation, we are something you want. We have games. You're something we want, money. Now, there's a lot of money out there. There's a very limited supply of games. Exploiting this power imbalance to say, well, you have to meet us on our crappy terms or you can go pound sand, it's not very friendly. So just because other people out there do that and exploit the license in unfavorable ways doesn't mean you should be cool with it. You should say, hey, I like your game, but the fact that I have to be always online to play a single-player game is stupid, and you shouldn't make me do that.
There is, and I'll not name names here either. There is a distribution service that has sole rights to some titles I would otherwise spend a lot of time playing. Because I don't like some of the rationale behind that distribution service, and because I do read the small print thoroughly, I choose not to play those games. And I think that education level in the gaming consumer does seem to be rising. And I would hope that as time goes on, that puts more and more sway onto people to say, well, let's evaluate how we do this. And I'm gonna segue that into something else that someone brought up earlier in the chat, and said, okay, we can accept, or I can accept, and I'll make the case, that it is actually the implementation of DRM that is often more of the issue than DRM itself. And we'll possibly get into that one in a moment. I would say the vast majority of DRM implementations are very, very poor. I also have experience of pure play DRM that started in a corporate environment for things like managing the security and privacy of content outside the environment. And there's definitely a case for DRM in situations like that. But are there, in your opinion, good implementations of DRM that do not hinder the end user, but support the intended purposes of distribution control from the supplier?
Sure. Well, I will start just briefly before I answer your question. One of your people on the chat says, regarding the topic I just covered, if you don't like the deal, what can you do about it? The answer is, of course, as Aiko said, don't give them your money, or give your money somewhere else. Regardless, let me answer your question now. DRM implementations can be ruinously bad, but DRM, I'd argue, is always bad. Simply because there's DRM starts with, there's the slippery slope argument, and I'm not going to go down that one because it's a particularly bad logical fallacy, but any implementation of DRM is essentially installing a rootkit on your computer that says, I want to control what you're allowed to do. Now, I don't have such incredibly sensitive information on my computer that if someone were to hijack it, I don't know, we'd have nuclear reactors melted down. But I do think that whether or not I have that level of privacy in my data required, why should I be granting someone else the right to control how I consume my content, how my computer accesses things, and in general attempt to dictate to me, I paid for something and now you're telling me after I paid for it, I'm allowed to enjoy it. Even the lightest DRM I can think of, and one that pretty much everyone agrees isn't a bad DRM, which is Steamworks, has some downsides. Whether you're talking about the fact that I've experienced, if I don't set my offline mode up ahead of time, I suddenly can't play my games, or the fact that I can't buy games because I'm a weird edge case of Steam's overlapping licensing problems. There are definite examples where DRM interfered with my ability to play games. Now, I'd say 90% of gamers have never encountered DRM that stops them from doing what they want to do, because most gamers want to turn on their computer, which probably has an Ethernet cable plugged into the back of it, and play their video games.
Doesn't always work, sadly, might I point out. I have had many a single-player games where even though I am plugged in, because of the distributor's server is down or tier 3 has gone down, I can't play.
Yeah. So, but the overwhelming majority of gamers never or rarely encounter DRM. What I found is the people who crusade against DRM are the folks who have encountered it and realized, holy crap, I don't control anything I paid for. I've sunk $10 or $15 or $20,000 into gaming as a hobby over the last X number of years.
No
and not
comment.
only do I not only do
No
I not
comment.
control the content, but really, if you think about it, and this is particularly germane to what GOG does, in 5 years or 10 years, this game that I have a license to, which never expires, will, because I can't authenticate it anymore. So my always online required connection for, take a random city building game name I won't mention, game won't work in a couple years because it will every 10 minutes it has to check and see is the server on. Can I connect? Is everything cool? Once that server's not kept up because they moved on to the next game, you can't play anymore.
Or just
so even
because
if that
you
was
can't
really
connect.
well done. Exactly, or you can't connect. Even if that was a really well done implementation, which I think everyone agrees it was not, it would still be crappy because eventually you can't play the content at all.
Let's dive in, Pseudo, because I'm going to segue out wider again in a moment. So,
I know you are, but see, the thing is, I can understand the implementations as to why DRM has come into existence. It is so difficult to control distribution, and I can understand developers being a bit terrified by piracy, etc. Some people have suggested that people are taking the amount of piracy that's actually occurring way out of the actual realms of reality for figures and numbers. Others are saying they're estimating way too low. However, what I want to know is what MISPA believes is an appropriate implementation of DRM. Now, I am the kind of person who, if I like a game, I will play it. I will make that sacrificial choice to click I agree so that I can play a game, because there are certain games that I just am really attracted to. There are other games where I'll look at it and I'll go, I can't do it, because I can't justify it to myself. There are just some titles that are just that woohoo for me, and others are meh. And if you're meh, I'm not going to click the I agree button. But I want to know what MISPA believes is an actual good use of DRM within, I will specifically state, the gaming market. Because to be perfectly frank, the only time I can actually see it properly used is in an MMO. Because you have to log into a login server. They're storing your content, they're storing your character, your class, your gear, etc. And they do that so that people can't mess around with their characters when they're offline, come online, and all of a sudden have the +10 sort of I am uber awesome. And I can understand that, and that's actually a form of DRM. But I cannot think of another positive implementation off the top of my head, and I'd like to know if you can.
well, I'm guilty of playing devil's advocate a little bit there. But I can think of some enterprise examples where things are probably appropriate. If we look at some real high-end 3D stuff, if we look at Lightworks, if we look at some super high-end video editing, and some financial software, it tends to be auth key locked. So I've got my dongle on my keychain. I can go anywhere at all and use it, but my license is on my USB. And that has to be plugged in when I start the unit that I'm running. And I haven't run into colossal issues with that. I've run into some very minor ones that were hardware specific.
I do remember hearing an interesting interview with, and I'll get this wrong, of course, because once again, old brain is crappy, but an interview with one of the guys who developed, I think it's Maya, or maybe 3ds Max, one of the very powerful 3D modeling softwares, where they said, you know, we know everyone pirates our software when they're students, and that's perfect, because when they go into enterprise, the company has to pay for the tool set they knows, which is the one that they pirated when they were a student.
Yep.
So they put their prices that high, and they don't go really out of their way to make authentication very strong, because no student buys it, but every student uses it. Then it goes into enterprise, and they all have to pay this really high price for the enterprise licenses. So something like that is again a case where if you had extraordinarily good DRM and no one could crack it, probably they'd find some other tool to use instead, and suddenly you'd probably find you're losing market share.
Yeah, I think that industry's grown up a little though, because they now have to use one well-known organization that puts things both in the cloud and has local implementations. They now have some very sane access to products, particularly on student licensing.
Yes.
And it has to be, not for economic gain in the short term, but for that mindset and buy-in later on down the line when it's, hang on, is that really £3,800 what per seat? Why? Yes, it is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a case, again, where you talk about your three currencies, money, time, and self-worth, right? When you put the money value low enough, even a student will be like, $10 a month? Sure. Because I've got everything, the official, most updated version, it's all on, I can use it. Because they solved the problem of pricing. They brought the money price low enough where the other two prices were too high to pay. And if you can solve that, whether it's for enterprise software, whether it's for game, whether it's for anything, you don't need to worry nearly as much about piracy, whether or not you have DRM, because you've solved the piracy problem by bringing the price within sensible bounds for people.
Okay, so let's go I'm going to drop us into round table mode so I can not worry about clicking too much for a moment. You can now see all three of our screens and just stare at the interesting person. I'll let you decide who that is. Let's talk about the wider legal framework and all this stuff that starts to intermesh. You brought up one of my favourite topics earlier. You mentioned the phrase fair use. So,
yes.
You're getting the curveballs here, I'm afraid, Trevor.
No, that's all right.
Fair use. What is fair use, and why do we need it anyway?
Let's start with I'm not a lawyer. If you take my advice as legal advice, God help you.
Yeah, could I just put on, none of us are lawyers. We disclaim anything that we say, and I'll just leave it at that.
You know, to be honest, I think that's what's really interesting is the fact that in order for us to even have a discussion about fair use, we have to preface with, we're not lawyers. I mean, that kind of says it. Have you ever taken the time to read a legal document where it's been properly legalese and you're just sitting there going, what the hell am I reading?
Once upon a time, I had to draft them and hand them over to compliance in another job.
Yeah, I occasionally do those.
No wonder you're insane.
At GOG, and it's balls, I'll tell you what. So, let's talk about fair use. Fair use is the idea that some stuff that's copyrighted is still culturally relevant and can be used in limited situations, either for editorial commentary, for news, or parody. There's also derivative works. A variety of things are protected because copyright law is, frankly, a kind of ugly, misshapen, lumpen mutant of a thing. The original idea was, let's make something that kind of encourages people to come up with cool stuff because nobody else can use it for we'll say 20 years. And then Disney was like, whoa, 20 years? We have Mickey Mouse, and we don't want somebody else to use Mickey Mouse as their own marketing slogan, so let's just keep extending this. That's technically, I think, trademarking, not copywriting, but whatever, work with me. I'm not a lawyer, as I mentioned. So as a result, copyright law has extended way beyond the initial concept behind it, but then you've got people who want to say, well, but if I want to make a parody video with the mouse that says, ah, Disney's terrible, or whatever, am I going to get sued? And then they had to say, well, okay, no, you can do that because it's culturally relevant. And someone said, well, can I make a doctoral thesis on Mickey Mouse because that's editorial content? They're like, okay, that's fine too. And then the news said, well, can I cover Mickey Mouse in the news or do I get sued? They went, fine, yes, you're fine too. So as a result, all these exceptions got wedged in. And fair use is extremely tricky because fair use kind of comes down to, can you make a sufficiently persuasive argument after you spent a whole bunch of money in court? And no one wants to do that. As a result, you see things like, let's harken back to the top of the show when TotalBiscuit's video got taken down due to copyright complaints. Was it fair use in America? I would argue very definitely yes. But YouTube has a burden to take things down immediately when someone sends them a DCMA copyright compliance problem, because otherwise they would be sued for this content, and that's not cool for them. As a result, they take it down immediately, and then if this ever went into court, TotalBiscuit would have to argue in front of a judge and a lawyer and spend a lot of money saying this 8-minute video I made is fair use, and after spending $100,000, the judge would go, no problem, yeah. So most fair use cases don't go to court because no one's willing to spend the money, and because the Supreme Court doesn't want to talk about those things because they're extremely complicated, and whenever they change anything, everyone gets angry at them.
I'm going to jump in here because there's a distinction that needs to be made. YouTube, unfortunately, is just youtube.com. Now, .com domains are run by, I believe it's Network Solutions, which is actually, .com is sort of, all the domains under that are owned by the United States government, and they can actually do proper takedown notices if you are a .com. If you're a .co.uk, it's the United Kingdom who's responsible for those domains. You know, it's the domains themselves, you have to be held responsible for whatever governing body governs that particular TLD. Now, in this particular case, if we're not in the United States, you know, you're over in Poland, we're here in the United Kingdom, we're producing content, we're going to be putting it on a site that is supervised by .com, which means they have to make it relevant to the laws of that country. Now, that to me, I think, is what impacts a lot of the legal laws, etc., that occur. Now, I was going to ask you a question earlier, and I think this is a really good place to bring it in. We know that the EU is dipping their fingers into copyright law. We know that they're dipping their fingers into things like privacy and getting into technology. Now, the United Kingdom doesn't always adopt every directive that gets passed down by the EU, though they tend to try to cater to show good faith. Do you believe that by having GOG located in the country that you're located in, that it actually makes it easier for you guys to do your distribution, to do your DRM battle? Or do you find that you actually are struggling, like if another country decides to, or a person in a country decides to buy a game from you, are you subject to the laws of that particular purchaser? I mean, do you actually find it easy, or is it more complicated, or do you guys find yourself with the legal trying to figure out what fits where? I mean, it's a difficult issue. And that's a big question, and I'm really sorry to smack you with it.
No, that's fine. With this sort of deal, it actually, it's complicated. With some issues, it makes it a little easier because I'd say the EU is inherently, in some ways, more consumer-friendly with their laws than the US.
I agree with that. With a lot of
the other hand, it also makes life complicated because, for example, there was a case in Germany which was decided and hasn't yet gone to the highest court in the EU, but may eventually go that way, where they said, even if you buy digital content, if it doesn't work or you're just not happy with it, within, I think it's 14 days, get your money back. Now, on Steam, they deactivate the game, you can't play it, problem solved. On GOG, we can't deactivate the game, no DRM. So if you buy a game and you're like, this is not very fun, get my money back. This is not very fun either. Get my money back. Not very fun either. There's no limit in this law for how often you can be like, I'm just going to take $15 and buy every game in your catalog because I'm willing to spend that much time with email and customer support getting the money. And at that point, we would not technically have a provision to be like, stop it, stop, go away.
But you
don't
would
have
be
the
well within your rights.
DRM.
Exactly.
But you would be well within your rights not to serve that customer, I do believe.
We could eventually say, sure, no, this account, you can't buy games anymore. Then they make a new account. And with that same $15, be like, all right, here's $15, I'll buy this game. That game is crappy, give my money back. So unless we were to start blocking IP addresses, which ends badly because many countries find themselves with NAT gates where they've got, an entire city behind one IP address, that's not going to work well. So there's no good solution for us if in the EU law they end up saying, you know what, yeah, you give your money back. Man, what do we do then? We haven't got any DRM, so we just have to kind of hope that you don't screw us. I mean, it gets tricky there.
It does get tricky. There was an interesting action that I believe it. Oh God, who was the one who wrote Dogma? Kevin Smith, I believe his name is, or what have you. He did something which was rather interesting. He kind of sort of in the same framework as you. You can't really say, "Give me back my stuff," or cater to the people who are going to be that abusive to that kind of framework that you're setting up. However, what you had said though is that you offer something beyond just the games. You offer the support, you offer the extras, and Kevin Smith did that. He has this ability. He set up a show or something where he actually toured with the movie into the theaters, and instead of just paying for that gigantic movie ticket, you were actually getting a chance to sit down with him and talk with him. He brought that something extra with the DRM that came with it, which means you're watching it in a theater, you're watching it under my supervision, but you guys are offering something else. So that's at least a benefit to you guys. If you guys were just like Steam, where it's really the community who seems to help each other out, I don't know if it's going to be as good for them, although like you said, they can just tick that button of deactivate and it's done. But,
Well, it is,
there's my support for GOG. You guys do more than just sell games.
There we go. I would say it's not like a huge concern for us because I don't think that if this law gets enacted and we have to give money back within 14 days because you're like, the graphics are too green or whatever, we would not see so much exploitation. I don't think that we'd suddenly be like, now we're broke. So it's once again, there's easier ways to pirate a game. If you want to get the game for free, there's torrents for that, really. If you have to spend 4 emails back and forth with tech support people who have other things to do than answer just your email, odds are you're going to be like, screw it, I'm going to go to Pirate Bay and buy this game instead. So it's not a big concern for us if this ends up becoming law, but this kind of thing is a little bit, it makes things trickier in the EU than it might be in the US. But on the other hand, the fact that we are in a more customer-friendly area, I think has affected the mindset of everybody in the company when they founded it, and they said, really, we want to do what's right by the customers first, and then we'll make sure and worry about how to actually to make this as monetized as we can from there.
Okay, so let's try this one for size. We've got this wonderfully complex legal framework. We have copyright, we have trademark, we have fair use, we have publishers trying to control sort of distribution and resale. Distribution channels is a whole nother discussion we can go into here for their product, and territory divisions and all these things. Let's just say that the world just got founded, and the world just got founded with the current understanding of technology. Now, the laws that we have, the legal frameworks in all of these countries are iterative components that have been built up over time, and a lot of stuff that's not fit for purpose is being used. I mean, I'm trying to think of the example, there's laws in the UK that means, legally, I believe, a pregnant woman can relieve herself inside a policeman's helmet. There's rules to do with moving sheep over certain bridges. You know what? They're still legal. I've not seen anyone attempt to do so anytime soon, I hasten to add.
I'm of Welsh descent, and apparently it's legal in London to still shoot a Welshman with a bow and arrow. So
that could be troubling. So if we take away all that backstory, if we take away all this hybrid evolution of law and all the intricacy that's been built up, and someone said to you, well, tell you what, Trevor, you're a nice chap. Can you just write the laws that cover everything to do with copyright, fair use, distribution, and make them simple? What should they be?
Yeah, you want to know what I do? And this is, here's, I guess, we'll call it my anarchist bent, whatever, I don't know. Abolish copyright. There's no reason for copyright. Why would we have copyright? Copyright's stupid.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate with you here.
Of course.
And I'm actually not even sure it is devil's advocate here, because I can think of some very valid rationales for copyright. Let's say that I have a huge R&D department, and I want to spend hundreds of thousands of British pounds sterling coming up with a better mousetrap. And let's say that I spend £500,000 and actually I've made a better mousetrap, and it only exists because of my effort.
Sure.
How do I make that economically viable if someone else can copy my mousetrap if there is no copyright, no protection?
That's a good question, and I have a great answer for you too. I will give you two different examples. The first one comes from current day existence. There's a company called, I believe it's Merck, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And they make a whole lot of money from an asthma medicine which combines a corticosteroid with a bronchodilator. Neither of these is particularly unique by themselves, but they put them together into one container so you can take one puff twice a day and you hopefully won't die. Now, this is not a particularly clever invention. Both of these drugs, they don't have patents for anymore because the drugs are more than 5 years old, but this unique formulation, they do. Now, any other pharmaceutical company out there could go and say, I'm going to combine these two together in a slightly different formulation and sell this. And there are companies out there based in various countries around the world that make generic brand drugs. So Merck went to those companies and said, we're going to pay you some money to not do that. So they don't. So if you've invested a bunch in R&D, and pharmaceuticals is a good case here, where R&D is not the biggest part of their budget. Marketing is the biggest part of their budget, which includes things like that. Mm-hmm. As another example of where you can find music artists. Pick your favorite musician anywhere. He makes bupkis from a CD sale. He makes nothing, unless he's a superstar who renegotiated his contract when he was a triple platinum bestseller and can say, no, I should actually earn some money for the record sale. They make like a penny on a $15 album. So these guys are essentially giving away their album to make you come to their show. So their R&D, their research and development was the years of training, learning to play an instrument, the years of honing their craft to write good songs and make catchy lyrics and figure out some way to make a 4-chord hit, which isn't all that tricky because everyone seems to write one. But let's suppose it was years of research and development to make that happen. Then at the end of it, they go to the concert and they fill a stadium with 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 people. We'll pay $50 a pop to come watch them sing. And they make about half that ticket. So all the money they put into their preparation ahead of time, they monetized not through the actual recording. The recording for them is a lost meter. It brings you into their show. So if you invented a better mousetrap, you can either, one, make it so well no one else is going to bother. Two, make it with such a very narrow margin nobody else can succeed. That's Amazon's business model. Anybody else out there could make a website, but nobody else out there has the purchasing power they do to say, we'll make a penny on every item we sell, but we sell 1 billion items a day. And then three, the other way you can do it is use your really clever item as a way to make people give you money for something else instead. None of these requires copyright. Anybody can copy your stuff if you either don't pay them, or they can find a better way to do it, or you can't figure out how to use your cool item to make people come see you in person, or whatever your other monetization process is. So just because right now the way we make money is that way doesn't mean it's the only way you can make money.
The frustration with that model, though, is what is being suggested is don't necessarily invest in the product, invest in the marketing. Because the reality is you could be the best guitarist, you could be the best writer, you could be the best name something. You could have people crowdsource your development of your album, your game, whatever, which is incredibly popular. But if you don't have the marketing to go with it, what's the point?
That's
because
true.
You're not
Even
going to get out
right
there.
That's
Well, I
true
know.
even
I'm
with
just saying.
copyright law.
I'm just saying. It just seems interesting that the money shift is no longer on the development of the product; it's on the advertisement of the product. And your product could be the cheapest piece of poo, but if you've got great marketing, which we know in reality happens, you know.
Golden poo.
So really what you're saying is things wouldn't be any different than they are now. Because some of our best authors, whether you're talking about Ralph Waldo Emerson or Emily Dickinson or Edgar Allan Poe, these guys are phenomenal writers, and they were all broke when they died because they didn't market their work. Someone else found it later and said, holy crap, this is incredible. I'm a publisher. I'll make a bunch of money off this poor dead sap's work. So the existence of marketing as a way of making money exists independent of copyright as well.
Well, fair enough. I agree with that. However, I kind of believe they're in copyright, but I believe in it in a limited manner. 85 to 115 years seems a little extreme to me when it comes to how long someone should have copyright for something, especially, you know, in the concept. I have severe opinions when it comes to certain games and things like that. But, you know, if you have something like, for example, like you said, the particular formulation of the chemicals for that particular steroid and everything else like that, they had for 5 years. 5 whole years. Now, that to me makes some sense. And you have some kind of limitation. At least there's a little kickback. And if anything, it actually means if someone is doing really good at producing something or really good at writing or developing or whatever, they're going to be inspired to do it more and innovate more because they know in 5 years' time that cash cow is gone. You know, in a way, I kind of think there needs to be some kind of copyright, but I think what we've got right now is way too extreme.
It is very extreme, and I could even argue that a 5-year term for copyright would be awesome. But you asked me if I was going to write the law, I would say let's have none whatsoever. And I think it's an appendix.
Yeah.
We don't need it anymore. It's the, I don't know, the vestigial tale of our legal system here. There are people like Cory Doctorow, who is a very talented science fiction author who gives away all of his books completely free on his website and earns a pretty good living anyway because he runs one of the most successful nerd and geek culture news aggregation sites on the net, boingboing.net. He goes and speaks publicly in a variety of places about nerd and geek culture and copyright law, and he's made a living doing things other than just being a writer. Now he writes and he makes a lot of money on his books because people know him. And this comes back to marketing. People know him. But even if the books had DRM, even if they had copyright law behind them where you could never make a copy for yourself, he's still known. That's why you go buy his books. You buy books from, I don't know, Neil Gaiman because he's famous. He's also very good. But he could be very good toiling in obscurity and no one would know. You buy J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books because she's famous. If she releases a book under a pseudonym, no one buys this. And they figure out it's her, suddenly the sales go up 8,000%. Same talent was there. It's people know about it, now they go buy it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, we've touched on a wide range of topics, and I'd like to do 2 things. I'd like to give you the chance, if you want to talk specifically about what's happening in your No DRM campaign. We've seen some interesting photos of bits and pieces that were happening at events recently. And you can choose to do that now. We can do that a little later.
Talk a little bit about it, sure.
Oh, okay, we'll do that first. But I'll just throw this out there so people can get their thinking caps on. We're going to be poking the channel for questions for you. Now, I do believe that you have been kind enough to come up with the offer of, I do believe it's 5, you'll correct me if I get this wrong at any point, keys to access some DRM-free games from GOG.
Yes,
And it strikes me that some of the people in the channel might want to get their hands on some DRM-free games. So I'm going to peddle a bargain with people, a deal, if you will. I'm going to trade keys for questions. We'll try something different. But they have to be
That is different.
intelligent questions.
Oh, our audience is incredibly intelligent. You know that.
As arbitered by a 3-way vote. So asking why Auntie Mildred's goldfish could talk is not going to be considered a suitable question. We'd like them on topic, we'd like them on GOG, we'd like them on everything to do with copyright, trademark, DRM, legal issues, and stuffs that is of interest. Aiko, are you lurking there? Aiko is now cowering in fear, going, how am I going to moderate this?
Like, I'm seeing these really wavy lines on my system, like, all of a sudden, and, like, I'm wondering if our electricity is starting to go...
If we get a blackout, we'll know what's happened. So, Trevor, over to you to talk about the DRM free revolution, and then we shall be back.
Alrighty. We're actually doing some filming and some preparation for a DRM free revolution we're going to launch. We'd hoped to launch it actually a couple of weeks ago, but sadly, due to reasons, mostly because we're trying to line up some big partners behind it, we haven't launched it just yet. We'll launch it early next year. But what we are doing is trying to get gamers more educated about what DRM is and get them to tell people like the ESA and the IGDA, that's Electronic Software Association and Independent Game Developers Association, to have a stance on DRM. The ESA has some of the biggest publishers in the business who, of course, are fans of DRM. So I don't realistically expect to have the ESA go, you know what, you should all stop using it. But certainly at least having a discussion about it, I think, could be really valuable, because a lot of people just assume that you have to have DRM. I had a discussion when I was actually at Eurogamer where I met Pseudo. Had a discussion with a guy there who said the only reason you can get games for PC gaming cheaply is because of the DRM. Because Steam sells these games cheap because of DRM. And I'm like, I'm going to blow your mind now, buddy. What if I told you there's a game store out there with more than 600 games completely DRM free, all of which are sold in a very similar price structure to the way Steam does it? You're like, I don't believe it exists. I'm like, that's funny because I've worked there for 3 years. So there are people who seriously, if they know DRM, are like, well, DRM is necessary for my hobby to continue. So informing people about what DRM is, about why they should care about it, about things like, you know, we've seen people start to wake up a bit. There was the whole Xbox One DRM feedback where they're like, always on DRM, don't have an internet connection, don't buy an Xbox One. That was a little rough for the internet. Definitely a lot of pushback in there. So we're hoping to kind of capitalize on that in the next couple of weeks and months to come, really begin to drive some momentum behind the idea of, you know what, my games should be DRM free, and I want to tell developers that I will buy games if they're DRM free, and I believe DRM free gaming is the way to have things go.
Now, we have had a heck of a lot of people throwing in some questions, and someone, Nini, I'm looking at you, decided to still ask about Aunt Mildred's goldfish. But I think that was all in jest. We've had some incredibly good questions come through. Now, I noticed you looking over there, Ms. Have you noticed something in particular that is thrown out to you?
Well, actually, I'm going to ask the voice from on high to come and say hello for once. Aiko, are you there?
Come to us. Oh, wait. Let me get the candles. Let me get the chicken.
I'm sure we're going to summon an Aiko.
I will thrice name Aiko. Aiko, come. Wait, I'm supposed to do it in a scary voice, aren't I?
Yeah, Aiko's talking.
There you go.
Ooh.
Now,
Ooh.
if he hasn't now run off, Aiko, are you there? Say something.
I am indeed.
Welcome, Aiko! To those of you wondering who this is, Aiko, along with Kasabian and some others, are some of the people behind the scenes that help make this all tick. So thank you, guys. You are awesome. But Aiko...
Sort out my volume. Give me 2 seconds.
We're just going to turn up an Aiko.
He says he's sorting out his volume.
And Aiko, perhaps you could pick a question and ask it, but please make sure you know who asked so we can distribute these keys, should the questions be deemed worthy by Trevor.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's dive in with the first question then. This is from Killing Eye Machine. Not Killing Machine, Killing Eye Machine. What does it take to convince a publisher to sell a game without DRM?
It's a darn good question.
Easy. It's surprisingly easy. We've been in business for five years now. 5 years? 5 years now, yes. Man, that was embarrassing. 5 years now. And what we can say is, look at all the money we've made. And that's surprisingly persuasive. When I'm like, well, I would love to talk to you, but I'm too busy drowning in a vat of money.
Do you have any public turnover figures you can share or anything of that nature?
We're publicly owned by a company called, and they just changed their name, CD Projekt SA, I think. And there's figures are public, but they're all in Polish, so I have no idea what they mean.
That's a great answer. So are you mean to tell me that when it comes to contacting publishers, you actually get a really good turnout? I mean, I would think that you would get a turnout from the smaller, the smaller games, the ones that have passed by a couple of years ago, the ones who aren't seeing that current marketing sales. But, like, you guys did The Witcher 2.
Well, The Witcher 2 we got because CD Projekt Red is owned by the same company that owned us, so that was kind of our easy in on that one.
That's fair enough. Have you actually had a contact with AAA titles and actually had this kind of discussion with them, or are you finding it's more the smaller independent publishers, or, I mean?
Sure. AAA titles are really tricky, at least in part because most of them are developed with certain assumptions behind them, right? They're assuming they're going to have a multiplayer framework of some sort, and they're assuming that someone else will be providing it. That someone will usually be Steam. So if we said, hey, we want to have your game that's, we want GTA 5 on GOG. I would love to have GTA 5 on GOG. And they say, great, how do you handle online? And we go, that's a very good question. Fairies? Pixies? I don't know. At that particular point, that's an argument, a discussion we can't move past right now. And of course, also, yes, DRM is very difficult to sell on AAA brand new titles, saying, hey, do it DRM free because we're awesome. But for a lot of these games, we can go and say, your game is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years old. It is dropped off the list into oblivion. But we can revitalize the title. We've got, whether it's 3-year-old games or 20-year-old games on GOG that sell, because the DRM-free approach works really well, even with old titles when you're like, these shouldn't be making money anymore. Now, our argument is, look at how well they work with old titles. You should try them with new ones. And we've seen some success. We've seen games like Divinity Dragon Commander from Larian Games, which was a brand new day one release for a pretty big RPG, RTS strategy, conversational empire sim mashup. It's quite a game. We've also had things like, what else have we released? Omerta City of Gangsters. We've released some other games like Rise of the Triad 2013 and Shadow Warrior 2013. We've had some games that are, I wouldn't say necessarily fully AAA, but are definitely some pretty big titles released day one DRM-free on GOG. And as those titles succeed, we're now able to go to publishers and say, there's money here, you're missing out. That said, discussions don't happen quickly. So just because they're like, this is interesting, doesn't mean anything will happen in the next year.
So the paraphrase...
So it's more or less getting it started. It's the hard part. But once you've got someone to take that initial, we'll say, risk, because in the end, that's what you discuss. It's risk. In the end,
yes.
My question off the back of that then is, are you internally satisfied with your publisher rerun or your publisher return rate? Once they've put a title through yourselves, do you see that positive tale of, hey, they're back again?
Well, almost every publisher we've signed. Mind you, we have Interplay, we have Atari, we have Activision, we have Ubisoft, we have EA, we have Square Enix. Everybody out there practically is working with us. There's a few big guys who we continue to wish we would sign, namely people like Take-Two, Microsoft, and LucasArts, which is, I guess, now Disney. But in general, almost every big player out there we have signed, and they've released multiple titles with us. And frequently they go back and will release a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth series of titles after the first initial kind of, oh God, what's going to happen? Then they see the success and they say, you know what, let's release more. Because the return we get on titles is really good. We have a very active community. And the other thing we've also found, not just for the big guys, for some of the small guys, indie games that are maybe trying to get on Steam Greenlight, if we get them on GOG, they can suddenly build a community. And then they can get on Steam Greenlight. And we're actually pretty cool with that, because we don't think that we should force you to buy a game from GOG if you don't want to. It's about freedom of choice.
I think that's probably one of the big things with the DRM, is it is about choice and freedom. At least you guys stand clear with that.
Yes, indeed.
But yes, Aiko,
So, to the voice
we summon
in the
you
sky.
from the ether.
See, I'm not sure if I should read out Nini's question now. She's mentioned it quite a bit.
I
What
can't
is
scan the chat to see what it is.
It's okay. Right, we will go with it. Nini, question: do you feel that piracy is a big problem in gaming broadly, and do you think that by allowing people to copy games might actually help publishers try and up the publicity for the game, getting people to talk about it, and thus generate more hype and sales for the game overall?
I do agree piracy is a problem. Sure, I saw the question go by. It was a good one, yeah. I do agree that piracy is a problem. I don't agree on the way to combat piracy. DRM it clearly doesn't work because every AAA game has it and they're all still pirated. So, accepting that as your end solution for solving piracy will work. The music industry has figured out, you know what, piracy is actually a really bad way to treat customers. That's why virtually everything is now sold without it. The movie industry is kind of beginning to think that way, but they keep punching themselves in the face. The ebooks industry is beginning to figure this out. We have companies like Bain Publishing, you have a company like Tor.com that are saying, you know what, we released our titles DRM free, and the piracy rate didn't change. There was still a lot of piracy, but making it DRM free didn't increase it at all, and everybody who did buy from us had a much better experience. So they're saying DRM free content is the way to go. Eventually gaming will figure this out, I'm sure. At some point in the future, I will be happy when I can't say, you know, in, I don't know, 2070, GOG is awesome because our games are DRM free, and everyone's like, well, aren't all games DRM free? That would be a really awesome day. Because that means people have figured out the way to fight piracy is to worry about solving the price and making it the price between time, self-worth, and currency, and saying, what can I do to make the currency value lower than the other two? And once you've accomplished that, then DRM or not, you're solving piracy. Because it is a problem that needs to be fixed.
I'm going to pose one to you interim while I co-select another. And you've mentioned a few times the third leg of this equation to solve, the stool of these three issues, and one of them being self-worth.
Sure.
I see a very big generational difference on acceptance of piracy. Is there an educational component that should be coming in here? Maybe not so much a moralistic one, because I don't think that massively works, but you know, some people don't actually really seem to care that their developers eat. And of course, if they don't eat, they don't write games.
Of course. And I think what you'll find is, and speaking as somebody who was himself once a teenager, you're fairly self-involved and very limited in your scope of what your problems are. When you're a teenager, you want what you want, and you don't particularly care if it's going to cause somebody else problems. But as you get older, you begin to think about, I want to support the people who do things I enjoy. People who back on Kickstarter, you know what? People who back projects on Kickstarter, they're 25 up, generally. They have the money, and they believe in backing something they think will be awesome. You don't find many 18-year-olds with the money to say, yeah, I'll chip in $1,100 to buy the Pico brew, or whatever the cost is for that thing. Because they don't have the money, and even if it's a game, they're like, I'm not going to back the game because it's already succeeded, so they're going to make it. I'll just pirate it when it comes out. But later on, they say to themselves, this developer has an interesting idea, and I deserve, you should be rewarded. So the saying that is a generational gap, I think, is not paying attention to the fact that when you were 14, you were unpleasant too. And blaming 14-year-olds for being unpleasant, yes, but saying that people who are 14 now will be unpleasant when they're 30, I'm not so convinced.
Okay, that's a good answer. I like that one. I took a recent experience from a conversation with ages probably 8 to 10 I had with a few individuals, and just conceptually totally unaware of the concept of piracy, and did not equate it to anything else.
Well, to 10, everything you want is magically provided to you by your parents. So the idea of piracy is like, what? It's something I didn't pay for, like everything else.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, though, there is actually a campaign being done right now, and I believe it's actually in the United States, to teach people from as young as 7 to respect copyright. And there are these brilliant little videos of these little kids going, this is so great. What a great song. What are you listening to? I'm listening to this. Well, here, let me share it. No, I don't believe in that. We really shouldn't share music because it's really bad for the industry.
Yeah,
Oh, well, that's okay. We're still friends. They actually have these campaigns going on, starting as low as 7. So I don't necessarily think it's that age thing anymore. I think, in all honesty, we are getting into an age where even the youngsters are going to be told, they're going to be sitting there going, I have no clue what the heck this is talking about. I'd rather spin in circles. But, you know, they're still going to be fed from a very young age information that may not necessarily be fair and balanced.
Sure, but that can backfire on you. I recall reading about a kid in middle school who got expelled because, or suspended or something egregious, because he was giving away free copies of Linux, and the teacher said, software can't be free. That's not possible. You're pirating. You're giving away illegal copies here, so to the principal's office with you little twerp. And he's like, no, this is open source. You aren't listening to crap. So it can not always play out for the best.
And I think my comment is, I see industry in different strata saying, hey, let's do things with education. That will solve all our problems. And I don't see anyone who actually I would count as a sane, unbiased voice saying, yeah, okay, let's make sure people actually understand these issues. Because I actually would support the concept of, hey, let's try and turn this I want to support people making things I love age from an older one, and let's bring that age down. Let's totally accept that time, resources, money all make a massive difference. I am a little alarmed by awareness levels, but I'm even more alarmed by the prospect of poor and damaging, biased education on the issues. So I'm kind of waiting for someone to go, well, we'll do something sensible to try and put some good messages out there, as opposed to telling 3-year-olds they can't listen to someone else's iPod.
Right, that's... Given that the people who have the only stake in passing this message out are the people who are arguably the craziest about it. People who write music, if an 8-year-old is sharing, I don't know, Metallica songs around, he's not going to buy
props to the 8-year-old.
Exactly, that's a freaking metal 8-year-old. He's not going to buy it anyway. So telling him now you should be paying for this is a bit ludicrous. But telling people that eventually, if you want to see more content of something you like, you have to pay for it, I think comes when you begin to think as a more rational adult as part of a community, and you go, you know, I love these guys, I have all their albums, I've never paid for them, but they're coming by in concerts, so I'll buy a ticket. There you go.
Well, one of the big things that friends of mine said back in college was, I am never going to buy an album. When they come to visit, I will see them in concert. But I will never pay for an album. And their philosophy was they don't want to support the recording company, they want to support the artist, and they believe the only way that the artist got money was through the concerts.
That is generally true, but then you also look at it, they wouldn't have heard about the artist if he wasn't played on the top 40 radio station, which is what's arranged for by the publishing company. So there's a reason to argue where, you know, I wouldn't have heard about this guy unless there was a publisher out there to do it for him. Although the internet has flattened things out immensely now, where you can find people like Amanda Palmer, who is a very successful music artist who doesn't really have a publisher behind her. She's built a community over 15 years of hard work.
John Gum does the exact same thing because he crowdsources everything and refuses to sign a contract.
Sure.
He's been sought out, and he's just like, no.
Let's have another interjection from the voice in the sky.
Right, well, this one comes from Akasim, Aka_Sim. Besides being a shop and DRM service, Steam actually offers cloud saves and other sort of extra features. I'm going to jump in and say the friends list there and community features such as the hubs that they recently introduced. Does GOG have any plans to do the same?
That's a good question. Technologically, it's pretty challenging to do that. Steam makes more money than we do because they're bigger than we are, so they've been able to throw more people at solving that kind of problem. The other question, of course, is if we were to implement, let's just say, cloud saving, not that I know we have any plans to do so, how would we do so in a manner that's not anyway supporting DRM? That's kind of challenging. Now do we say you can maybe make a link where anybody can access your game save on the cloud? How do we arrange for this to be an open, secure online repository of your data?
And protect your private data as well.
Yes, and I mean, deliberately, we don't, for example, we don't store credit card data for anybody who purchases anything from us ever. Now, this means we're a very low priority target for hackers because we've got no financial data stored. But it also means if we were ever hacked, which to date we have never been, they wouldn't get much out of us except your email and then whatever your password was for your GOG account, which should be different than your password you use elsewhere.
You should never use the same password in the same location or anywhere else. In fact, you should be using a password manager. There are many out there. Please make certain that you do participate in this kind of a thing because in all honesty, that's what will keep you safe.
Despite being entirely correct, other community services messages are also available.
Dun, dun, dun.
Sorry,
And if
it's one of-
anyone
it's
can
one of my
solve...
biggest bugs when it comes to security. But anyway.
And if anyone can solve the question that Trevor posed, he would really like to hear from you.
Well, I find it interesting because one of the really cool things about the old-fashioned games, about things like, Final Fantasy, etc., like the really old-school proper games was someone else played and put 798 hours into the game to get all this stuff, but didn't kill, like, the last major bosses, and then uploaded that game save so that you could download it and play it. Whether or not someone considers us cheating or whatever, that's a completely different thing. But that was part of the gaming community, was the sharing of saves. Hey, I happen to have unlocked this really ultra rare Pokemon. Here, have it. This is my game save. Go forth and have fun. That kind of community engagement is pretty cool. And that was a big part of the single-player titles. So, who knows? You might have options there.
Okay.
We haven't got an answer for that sort of thing yet. Are we investigating it? Heck, I don't know. We have very smart people in the tech department. That's their job, not mine.
And how many is that you've bestowed upon us, Brother Aiko? Is that 4?
I believe that was 4. I'm not quite sold on the brother Aiko part, however.
I thought that was 3 because we kept interjecting more questions.
I think it might.
Are you keeping track of the questions you were asking?
I was trying to.
Good.
Well, we know that Killing I'm Machine did.
Let us have either 1 or 2 more, depending on how generous you think Trevor's feeling. Another voice from the sky, please.
Well, this one comes from Dragnarok X, and I believe I haven't asked this before. If I have, please stop me. GOG started off as an older games platform. What drove GOG towards the DRM free focus? Please forgive me.
Well, that starts with the very beginnings of the company that eventually ended up making GOG. The company that ended up making us is a Polish distribution company called CD Projekt. CD Projekt was a physical box and CD games distributor for Poland. And they got their start shortly after the Berlin Wall fell. So they've got games they want to distribute, and they need to sell games that people can play, and shortly after the Berlin Wall fell, they didn't exactly have cutting-edge hardware. So what they ended up doing was taking these games that were 3, 5, 7 years old and re-releasing them, but putting in like a cloth map or a keychain or some stickers or something else, and the full 32-page or 64-page printed manual to give you a kind of mini collector's edition feeling for this game, which has been out for 7 years and which, because it was never legally available in Poland, was pirated widely.
Am I also right in saying you often went through a translation process to actually localize things where they actually had never previously been released or localized?
For some of them, although most people who played video games on PC back in the day, if they were playing them, they were playing them in English because there was no Polish localization. So the Polish localization was helpful for them, but the really main thing that got people interested was the fact they made this kind of mini collector's edition. And then they said, you know what we could do? We could add DRM to this. There's DRM vendors out there to try and fight the piracy. But these games didn't have DRM initially on them because they came around back when DRM was, please look up the 7th word and the 3rd sentence on the 16th page and tell us what it is out of the manual, because that was the copy protection they had. So rather than add something on top, they said, let's not. These games are already pirated everywhere in this country. Let's just offer a really good value, and they price things very reasonably, particularly for Polish income at the time, we were pricing things around $6 American, back when new games were coming out for 50 American bucks. People would go and buy these games and play them. And they were a huge success. And so when they wanted to move into the digital space in 2008, they said, we had a lot of success moving into the physical retail space with this model. How do we take this model and make it on the internet? And how do we do something that's different? Because at the time, Steam was, of course, established by them. There were other companies out there. There was Impulse. I think Gamersgate was around by then. There was Metaboly. There was GameTap. But a whole lot of them weren't doing much that was different. So they said, how do we make a unique store? Let me make it special and different. Let's not just sell the same game everyone else is selling the same way. So classic games, definitely. The fact that 2/3 of our catalog is only available on GOG and not sold anywhere else definitely helps us establish a presence in the gaming market. But then the fact that the games we do have are DRM-free here and usually nowhere else means that we are, even for the games that you can buy somewhere else, people will still come to us to buy them because they're DRM-free. That's been part of us since the very beginning.
Awesome. And I think we might have one more. Aiko.
I just want to point out before Aiko comes in that Abs Nerdity pointed out that the manual code or look up in the manual for the code DRM was awful. House of Wax or something had a stupid paper dial that you needed to use. That takes me back in games. Yeah. I mean, that takes me way back.
I remember Curse of the Azure Bonds, a gold box D&D title that had 3 different cards that would rotate, and you'd have to align, and they're all like nonsense gibberish symbols. So you'd have the prompt come up, and it says, oh, you've got this symbol, and turn this here, and do this. And then invariably, because I was like, I don't know, 8, and I had a dog.
Oh no!
First the thing gets chewed up, and now you've got to try and take these 3 different cards and find them first, because they're scattered around the living room, and then figure out how to align them properly. And it was a mess, I'll tell you what. So yes, I remember that too, Absurdity, and it was a pain in the butt.
So you've been influenced from an incredibly young age to be anti-DRM.
Yeah, fair enough.
Back in the days of the puppy. But yes, go ahead, Aiko, voice from above.
Right, with our
tones.
final question. Dulcet, okay. Velnox from Enigma, seeing as he tried to post it about 3 times and our friendly Nightbot chatbot decided to ban his chat. Do you believe, in a point that was made a few years ago, that the constant sales at sites at Steam, GOG and others devalue the perceived value of the actual products as they start only waiting for the sales to buy games instead
I
of
approve
actually
of
buying
that
them?
question.
That is a good question, and that's interesting to ask because a couple of years ago we came out and said we don't like these sales. And people were like, you're insane. We got a very strong and very negative feedback from the community on that. And the simple fact is these sales do work. In that, and we have these sales, we had 80% off sales before, you make a lot more revenue and you even sell a lot more titles. Like not just you sell more games, but you even make more cash overall. If you have the games 80% off and you had them 50% off. The problem is it does teach people a game is worth $3 or $4. When you have things like the Humble Bundle, where you can buy, I think they closed the most recent Humble Bundle, the Humble Bundle with Android. It's still running actually. I think it's 9 games, and the current beat the average is like $6.50, right? That's a ridiculously low price. And to the point where people figure, this is what my hobby is worth. I'll pay 70 cents for a game, and I'll play it for an hour or 2 and put it aside, and whatever, it doesn't matter, it was cheap. How you consume your game is your own business. I'm not going to tell you whether or not, if you just want to buy games and collect them and have them on a virtual shelf if that makes you happy, you don't more power to you. But the fact that those games are $1 or $2 or $3 means when you see a game and it comes out and you want it, you're like, oh, that will be awesome, but I have 700 games I haven't played yet, and this game will be half price in 4 months.
I don't know anybody like that at all. I really, really don't.
Now, you know, actually, I found myself saying that exact thing Thursday to some of my coworkers, the new XCOM expansion. It's coming out, it looks really awesome. I enjoyed the new XCOM. And I'm like, honestly, I would buy it, but unfortunately, I have Batman Arkham Asylum, which I just installed finally, Just Cause 2, and something else as well, Sword of the Stars the Pit. So I've got these 3 games to work through, and given that I work for a living now and am old and don't have much free time, this will be like 6 months before I play through them. And by then, the expansion pack will be half price. So why buy it now when by the time I'm ready to play it, it'll be so much cheaper? And knowing that it's going to be 3, 4, 5 months, spring sale on Steam, I'm sure that expansion pack will be 30 or 40% off. And I could pay I think it's $30 for the expansion pack now. I have the money to, but why? And the fact that we're being trained in this, I think, is long-term bad for the industry, even though it's good for gamers. So as a gamer, I'm like, this is awesome. As somebody who works in the business, I'm like, oh man, the average amount of money you're making per customer on your service decreases year to year. Because everyone is thinking, there's Humble Bundle, there's Indie Royale, there's Indie Bundle, there's Get Games, there's the Groupies, there's a million places I can buy these games at ridiculously low prices. Now the hassle I have to wonder about is where the heck did I buy this game from? But provided I can keep that sorted, the abundance of games now and the pricing of them means I don't have to pay a high price for them. So as a result, I don't expect to anymore. I figure they'll be cheap later. That's bad for devs.
And we can see the parallels if we look in the pure play MMO universe, where we're seeing the emergence. Actually, not so much in the last few months, but let's go back 6-12 months. We were seeing a marked emergence in free-to-play, both as a design ethos, but also as a response, quite often to perhaps not quite hitting the bullseye first time around. And the questions start to emerge: to what degree does that hurt quality? And that's a whole nother show. But there's definitely a mindset shift with consumers over time, and if my gamer hat on, combined with a lot of industry conversations, I come out of that going, I really don't want to keep shooting myself in the foot, because really, we're starting to do that a little bit. Not that I can understand why.
It's actually interesting. One of the places where I've seen that people who normally indie gamers, I think, are particularly prone to buying a game cheap because, man, it'll show up cheap pretty soon. And the only place I see where they're like, you know what, I'll pay a reasonable full price for the game up front is on Kickstarter, where they're like, this game isn't made yet, but I'll pay you $20 if you'll do it. So that kind of thing is actually now, which is insane to think about it. They'll pay $2 for a game, but they'll pay $20 for the promise of one.
And I'll pay $500 to have dinner cooked by the graphic designer and a grand high poobah title on the forums.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. It's the added benefits and the extra additional things, sort of like what GOG did of adding the little keychain or the cloth map or something else like that. Those little additional things actually make an impact. And yes, I did mention this through Twitter. This type of topic, this type of conversation is the type of stuff that we can lose ourselves in for hours.
And
because there is no easy answer. There is no easy fix. There is no, this is the way it's going to be, and end of story.
But sadly, as I was just about to do so, this is where I need to turn around and look at the virtual clock and say, oh, post-production video editors are going to hate us if this goes on any longer. So, just before we give Trevor the chance to impart any parting words, very briefly, Pseudo, where can people find us and why should they?
Well, we have an awful lot of stuff going on with an MMO buff. We have things such as The Show, which is all about discussions of the analytical nature, not just about MMOs, might I add, Trevor, but we cover gaming in general. We also have a show on Wednesday nights that is starting this Wednesday, as long as the Chewit doesn't eat through all of the wires, that is about TCGs and SCGs. And in fact, I'm going to be posting a link in a second to a competition to a Feria giveaway that we are doing. And if you haven't heard of Feria, I'll also post my link where I reviewed it. It's actually incredibly good.
And
Plus, the developers are going to be with us that Wednesday. So you're going to want to watch that.
Put your questions straight to the Feria devs. If you like a little bit of depth in your card games combined with some board and strategy, I would personally recommend giving that one a look. I have played it. I like it. If I'd played it and didn't like it, well, I wouldn't play it. It's quite simple. So that one's worth a watch on Wednesday, and that'll be top draw, the first edition coming out. But Friday is, well, we like Fridays. What's happening Friday, Pseudo?
I don't know. At this current moment in time, Fridays piss me off. I actually look forward to Monday. I do not look forward to Friday. I am so backwards. But Friday, we have our Cosmotronics show. We had issues last Friday, because of a Chewa that kidnapped our guests. Then we had problems with them chewing on wires. As far as I'm concerned, until we exterminate the Chewa, we're going to have issues. But hopefully we'll be able to actually properly have our episode 2 this Friday, where we actually will be going into lore, where we actually will have the guests and we will have saved them from the Chewa.
Indeed.
Raid, bring it on.
So to summarise, we're going to pick up on the balance of the lore issue for Cosmotronic, our Wildstar show, starting at the same time with, quote-unquote, very special guests, possibly plural. And I can't say it anymore.
Yes. Next thing that we have to cover before you go any further is please make certain that you are following us on YouTube, hitting the subscribe button. Please make certain that you are subscribed to us on Twitch. Please make certain you're following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+, because tonight we release the Kraken. Okay, technically speaking, we released the Naga, not the Kraken.
That's a different
But
device.
I just thought it would be cute. I failed, didn't I? Oh, man. But, yes, our competition for a Razer left-handed Naga. Like I said before, this is a rare opportunity. It's not a righty we're giving away. It is a left-handed one we're giving away. So all those lovely numbers are on the left-hand side for your thumb. This is awesome. If you know a gamer who is left-handed and has been having trouble getting their hands on things like Naga mice or what have you, this is the ultimate time to get involved.
I don't believe a left-handed one has ever been given away before, but we're voting with our, yes, we're going to support the 15% or whatever the number might be these days. Left-handed Naga being given away on the Facebook page. Keep your eyes open. But with all that, please like us, support us, follow us, because then we get to do more stuff and we can knock on more people's doors and say, hey, you have even more reasons to talk to us, and we think that's good. But I'm going to shush for once. Trevor, you get to say goodbye to everyone, along with any parting words you wish to impart.
Well, thank you all very much for having me on the show. I appreciate it. If you guys have any questions you want to continue to send to GOG, it's late here in Poland where I am, but by all means send us some tweets at GovCom, and in the morning we will look at them and try to answer them pithily in 140 characters or less, which is more challenging than it may sound.
That is fabulous. Trevor, you have been a superstar. It's been a pleasure talking with you this evening. From MMOBuff.
I'm thinking we're going to skip the late night after we're done.
We've done the post-show within the show. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. I know that we all have. I'm going to go straight to the final words. For MMORPG.TV, this is Mizpah, signing out.
Toodle pip.